So, good evening, everyone. My name is Tom Shepard. I'm a dad to six children, three of whom currently attend public schools in the Bronx. I am also a community organizer, co founder of the Bronx Parent Leaders Advocacy Group, the first CEC president's member on the New York City Panel for Educational Policy, and a steering committee member of the New Settlement Parent Action Committee. The Bronx Parent Leaders Advocacy Group is an alliance of parent leaders throughout the Bronx, including all six Bronx Community Education Councils, representing community school districts 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. We are a community of Bronx parents working together to build a better Bronx community. Our shared mission is to improve the educational experiences for our Bronx students by building strong relationships between families, schools, and the community organizations that serve them. As a diverse Bronx community, we share the common belief that a quality public school education for our children is a critical part of their success as adults. Today, in collaboration with the New Settlement Parent Action Committee, the African Democratic Club, STEMDUP Institute, and BronxNet, we are proud to present this first ever Bronx Parent Mayoral Education Forum. We organized this forum and invited this year's candidates to come and share with us their vision and plans for education if elected the next mayor of New York City. On behalf of the Bronx Parent Leaders Advocacy Group and all our
Shepard decía
partners,
que él es padre de 8 niños.
I would like to welcome our mayoral candidates and thank all of you for joining us. Our team has developed a series of questions that will be presented by this evening's moderator and collaborative partner, the host of Bronx Talk and Bronx Buzz on BronxNet, Mr. Gary Axelbank. Thank you, Gary, for working with us to make this event possible, and we look forward to working with you and BronxNet to help us build that better Bronx community I just spoke of. That said, I turn it over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Tom, and thank you so much to all the organizations that put this very important forum together. I'll just offer a couple of introductory words tonight. It's all about education. Of course, it's about the education of our children, of Bronx children, and also educating the general public about the candidates and who they are. But to be honest, it's also about educating the candidates, about Bronx people, about Bronx parents, and who we are. And I will tell you, having covered the Bronx for more than 25 years, people in the Bronx have a chip on their shoulders. They believe that they get passed over when good stuff gets handed out. And they certainly look at their schools and say, you know what? We've been through a lot, of course, during this year. And we want to make sure that the mayoral candidates know who we are, know that we're organized, and know that we really want to work collaboratively with whoever becomes the mayor to do better for all our children. Part of that education is something that I was very surprised when they asked me to host this, that they wanted me to mention that the Bronx is on sacred land. And they wanted to pay special tribute to the indigenous people who were here before us and whose culture and values are a part of the American fabric. The idea is to pay special tribute to our immigrant populations and to our diverse populations in the Bronx as they continue to struggle for inclusion, equity, and justice. And that's what I was referring to just a moment ago. The theory is if we can achieve inclusion, equity, and justice in education, then we will achieve those ideals in every corner of our society, as education is always the great equalizer, the great moral compass, and the great guide to every conscience. So there will be a link put in the chat so that everybody, including the candidates, can learn more about the original people of this continent and of this borough. It is important to honor and respect and tell the stories of all the people who contributed to our story to give us a sense of where we come from and where we are going as a nation. So right now, let's not waste any time. Let's get to it. Introduce the candidates. The Brooklyn Borough, we have them in alphabetical order, showing no favoritism. The Brooklyn Borough President, a former NYPD captain, and a founder of 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement Who Care. Nice to see Eric Adams again. Mr. Adams, nice to see you. Do we have, there we go. Okay. Nice to have you with us, sir.
I'm told the video can't start without your authorization.
All right, so let's get our tech crew to authorize Mr. Adams to be on the video, but we can make sure that that happens.
It should be live.
Should be live, they're telling me. So there we go. Okay, there you are. Hello, Mr. Adams. Nice to see you, sir.
Thank you.
Great. Let's move on. He built Queens West on the Long Island City waterfront. He launched a dozen small businesses and co-created NYC Votes to improve transparency in our democracy. Nice to see Mr. Art Chang. Mr. Chang, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's delighted to be here.
This candidate is very, very different from all the other candidates we've had. He's 18 years old, a graduate of Fordham Prep here in the Bronx, says he was inspired to run through his international travels. And so welcome to Thomas P. Downs. Mr. Downs, nice to have you with us, sir.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here tonight.
And a home builder, a restaurateur and entrepreneur. Let's say good evening to Peter Gomaris. Mr. Gomaris, nice to have you with us. Do we have Mr. Gomaris?
I do not believe.
He was here, but he's not here at the moment. All right, let's just keep moving forward then. The CEO and founder of one of the New York City's largest female-owned commercial construction companies, and was named one of Crain's Business 100 most influential women in New York City. So good evening to Barbara Kavovit. Nice to have you with us, Ms. Kavovit.
Thank you, and thank you for having me here.
And also the former vice chairman of Citigroup and a board member of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, Lincoln Center, and the New York Public Library. Nice to see Mr. Ray McGuire once again. Nice to have you with us, Mr. McGuire.
Thank you. Thank you for having me to the Bronx Parents Forum. Delighted to be here.
We should mention additional interviews were conducted with Scott Stringer and Maya Wiley. They will not appear in this forum, but in a separate program on BronxNet and in social media. Just for our audience, the candidates know we will rotate the order of questioning throughout the program. Each candidate will have 1 minute to respond to each question, and you will receive audio warnings at 30 and 15 when the time is up. So let's get right to it, begin our first question. And as I said, we're going to go in alphabetical order, and then we'll keep rotating it. So that would mean, Mr. Adams, you get started. Let's talk about the new normal. Because of the pandemic, we're entering a new era in our schools as regards counseling, enrichment, and support systems, and also technology. As the pandemic continues to change imperatives, what is your vision for addressing those changing dynamics in our schools? Mr. Adams?
Thank you very much. And I don't see it as a new era. I believe we have been in an old era of schooling, and we need to move into the new era of education. And that could be carried out in several levels. First, we have to expand our definition of education to be clear that it is not K through 12, it is prenatal through career. And we must look at our incoming students that are being carried by their mothers now. We need to look at students that are currently in educational settings. And then we need to look at those students who we betrayed, who are unemployable,
30
who
seconds.
don't have the skills to participate in society. And that is the approach, how we must
15.
focus on this problem. And by doing so, we need to look at real areas of correcting the wrongs.
Thank you very much. Let us go to Mr. Chang. Same question for you, sir.
Thank you. I'm going to actually just echo some of what Eric said right off the bat, which is that education spans from prenatal to workforce and beyond. We should have lifelong learning. And I want to elaborate a little bit more on this notion of different and what's normal. Every student is different. Every student learns differently. Every student comes from a different background. Every student has different strengths and weaknesses. And a school system, the new school system, needs to recognize each student as an individual with respect to those strengths and weaknesses. A 21st century education will start to think about students in those terms, and not in terms of this lockstep association between age and grade level. And particularly in this pandemic, when we already have 30% of students with IEPs, and half of the students in the school system are certainly experiencing some level of difference because of remote learning, we need to do better and treat each student as an individual.
Thank you very much. Let's go to you, Mr. Downs. Nice to have you with us, sir.
Thank you. Well, I am in a very special situation since I was someone who was transitioned into remote learning and was actually dealing with the new, as I should say, guidelines. And I was coming from an incredible amount of privilege to be able to transition so easily and still have the resources to learn. And the idea that so many people were underserved, especially in the Bronx, to not be able to provide the same level of education as students in private or public schools within Manhattan, and not being able to actually adapt to the system is something very scary to me. And as we move forward, we really need to focus on using technology, not only in the classroom, but at home, to help students to keep learning even when they're outside of school, and to ensure that they are capable of going into the job force in the future. Technology allows us to do so many great things, and having the training and the ability to keep learning outside the classroom is something that I think really should be utilized to help
time is up
and grow.
Thank you very much. Let's go to you, Ms. Kavovit. Nice to have you with us, ma'am. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, growing up in the Bronx, going to the public school system in the Bronx, elementary school, junior high school. My mom was a teacher in the Bronx for 40 years. So I really understand the Bronx. We can't afford to lose the generation. We need opportunity, diversity for all. And I think the most important thing is to modernize the schools, and being a builder, we need technology. We need for all the students to have access to technology, and we have to get rid of the disparity with the different classes of students. Everyone has to be equal. Everyone has to be able to have access to the same thing. When I was growing up in the Bronx, it was all about the teachers. It was all about in-class learning, and then being able to take that home. We need to bring technology into the schools so everybody feels equal and has the same opportunity from one classroom to another.
Thank you very much. Mr. McGuire, you'll get the final word on this particular question, sir.
Thank you. This forum and education is so important because it's made me who I am. Education is fundamental to me. And what we recognize is the issues of education, the crisis exists before COVID. We need to conduct student assessments and target additional support based on the individual student needs. Pandemic has impacted every student differently. We won't be able to apply one size that fits all. I would recommend that we reinstate all end-of-year assessments while limiting all the negative consequences for the schools or the students based on the performance. The results will then get reported back to teachers on an accelerated timeline so they can use information to guide their instruction for the remainder of the year. And then based on those assessments and on their own interactions, observations, teachers would then determine the most effective strategies to address areas in which individual students have fallen behind. Educators could then better direct our resources, including tutoring, extended schooling, and other forms of enrichment, especially for students that are far from meeting proficiency at the grade level.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's move to our second question, and the first respondent will be Mr. Chang. Mr. Chang, there has been a real problem of inclusion in Bronx schools. Parents of differing language and or cultural barriers have had real difficulty communicating with the school system, and they become disengaged. And then, of course, ultimately, their children suffer. How do we address this?
It's a great question. I was born in Jim Crow Atlanta to a couple Korean students, and was raised in an all-white school district in Akron, Ohio, where my kindergarten teacher didn't want to teach me because her brother was fighting people who looked like me. We need to do a system-wide survey of all the families in the school system, and we need to know what languages they speak, what is their level of proficiency with things like computing, and then we need to be able to have a way to, on a somewhat automated basis, be able to deliver the right kind of communication back to those families and children based upon those language preferences. And then we need to bridge the gaps with their students. Students are often torn between adjusting to this English-centric world and then the worlds that they come from their families. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Downs, same question. Now let's talk about language and language preventing access to equitable education.
Well, the best part about New York City, and especially a place like the Bronx, is the diversity within the people of the community. And speaking different languages is vital to keeping their own cultures and ensuring that their children do not forget where they came from, especially the children of immigrants. So with the technology we've now been kind of enabled with the pandemic, using that to better communicate to students and better have lessons tailored towards students of different languages by translating textbooks and lessons into different home languages, but also including teachers and faculty on staff who speak a multitude of languages. And if they don't have that language available, doing what we do in our hospital system and having a hotline to communicate with parents and students more easily so they're not lost within translation and forgotten about by the school and just rolled over. The other big part is teaching languages to students, whether that be English to non-English speaking children who would want to learn English, or students who speak English already, but now need the opportunity to learn Spanish, French, and Arabic and things of that nature, so we can grow as a society and so we can all better understand one another.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Kavovit. Let's address the same question, please.
Well, I think the most important thing, what I would do if I were mayor, is to set up a technology systems that translates in school to multiple languages. And these this technology could afford the ability for students to take home to their homes to give their parents the communication of where they are in school, what's happening in school, and the language that they speak. Also, I think it would be important for the schools to offer either English courses, perhaps during the day, or maybe night classes if the parents work. But I think definitely going into the 21st century and setting up a better system for technology so the parents can be able to understand what the students are doing and what access they have, it would be most important for the parents.
Thank you very much. Let's turn to Mr. McGuire. What do you think?
Yeah, listen, my plan is cradle to career. At its center are the parents. Under my plan, schools will serve as student parent community centers, which is expanding our current community school programs that exist in some neighborhoods. I would include multilingual family centers to help the parents navigate the DOE and school applications and access to tutoring. And I would partner with both existing and new not-for-profits, expand after-hours activities in schools across the city, and then make certain that offerings are aligned with the needs of the school community as identify the principals, teachers, and parents. So the parents are at the core with the language skills and with the multilingual offerings.
Thank you very much. Mr. Adams, you'll get the final word on this question. But we just need you to unmute yourself, sir. There we go.
Thank you. A couple of things we should look at right away. Of course, we should hire more multi-language speakers based on the areas that we are in and the languages that are needed. Then we should lean into technology, as was mentioned, so important. If we utilize our Department of Educational system, we will expand how better the technology will become, because this is a great testing ground to really evolve technology. Then expand on translators. You can always have access via telephone lines or telecommunication, but also culturally sensitive literature and an asset-based education system. We should be leaning into the diversity of languages instead of moving away from that. And that is something that, as the mayor, we're going to do.
All right, thank you very much. Let's move on to our third question. And so the first respondent will be you, Mr. Downs. The pandemic has shed light on a digital divide that has had a disproportionately negative impact on students and families here in the Bronx. Many have talked about it, that they have been at a decided disadvantage when it comes to remote learning. How can we ensure that each school is technology rich, and then of course each child have a device and broadband access, so there is equitability in educational opportunity?
Well, equity is always something that I've found is very important, especially within New York City and our underserved communities. By bringing our schools into the 21st century with high-speed internet and more technology available, such as iPads, we can be able to help students have technology in the classroom and hopefully transition that technology at home by working with our internet service providers to work with buildings to install high-speed internet, to rewire older buildings that may not be capable of high-speed internet, and ensuring that there is affordable high-speed internet, if not subsidized high-speed internet, for families in low-income situations or any family that has children at home. It is really important that we use the internet and that we use technology to grow instead of using it as, at the end of the day, just a baseless tool. We need to ensure that our families have access to internet at home and our programs at home and classes at home to be able to do homework, to be able to learn, and to be able to grow as people. Because at the end of the day, education is about growing these people.
Thank you very much. Ms. Kavovit, the digital divide.
I mean, I think that schools should definitely offer after school programs, and they should keep schools open longer so kids can do their homework. But I would like to see tapping into corporate America because I don't think realistically the government can do everything. So if I were mayor, I would definitely tap into corporate America to see if that corporations can give extra money to enable homes so they can tap into the internet and apply for grants from different foundations. But I think technology as it relates to education right now is everything, and we have to do everything that we can to make sure that homes and schools are equipped with technology, whether it be in after hours and or in the homes of where the students are.
Thank you very much. It's to you, Mr. McGuire, the digital divide, thorny problem.
It is big and it's getting broader. Every school and every student should have access to quality devices. And in picking up on what Mrs. Kakavit said, I have relationships in the corporate sector that will allow us to secure the donations to make sure we get every child a working tablet, a working digital device. Technology for schools is also a good use of the federal relief fund for schools. The upfront costs will create benefit for a number of years. As has been said by others, it is a fundamental right that we have broadband. More than 1.5 million New Yorkers today do not have a mobile or home broadband connection. My infrastructure plan includes making sure that every home in the 5 boroughs has access to reliable broadband service as well. You need to think about Broadway the same way we think broadband, the same way we think about public utilities as a basic right. Multiple obstacles, but I'll be able to work through those obstacles given the relationships that I have in government and business and with labor.
Thank you very much. Mr. Adams, what do you think?
Yes, thank you. Right now, we have a system that is surrounding the thought process of equality and not equity. We need to focus on equity and give schools and students what they need. Already, as the borough president, I have put over $100 million into our schools to address the digital divide in a very real way. And we should also give all our students notebooks. iPads are great, but notebooks allow you to do your research, type your papers, and get familiar with what's really needed. And we will partner with private industries to do paid internships. Our children need exposure to where technology is actually functioning in a real work environment, like my Brooklyn Navy Yard program, $5 million put into a school system there that has been amazing. Lastly, we need to take a real look at internet providers. They should become utilities. Let's pass the law and make it happen. It's no longer a luxury, it's a necessity.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chang, you'll get the final word on this question.
Thank you. So I'm the only candidate who is running who has built a major development project in New York City. In 1994 in Queens West, we created the first system, the first development of universal broadband. I'm also the only candidate who has helped launch the city's tech startup community. And since then have started 11 tech startups, including 2 tech incubators here. I know how critical technology is. Technology is not just a fixed wire problem. That was a problem back in the 1990s. It's a problem that actually needs,
30 seconds.
Has many, many potential solutions. I'm releasing tomorrow a digital Bill of Rights plan that calls for high quality, high speed, commercial grade internet to every single student household,
15
along with the equivalent comparable device to be able to access the internet.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's go to question 4, and our first respondent will be you, Ms. Kavovit. Let's talk about mental health and healing centered schools. Unfortunately, Bronx students have been disproportionately affected by trauma from many sources, and of course, even more so during this pandemic. Bronx children have had their general well-being and mental stability definitively challenged, and in some cases impaired. How can all Bronx schools develop healing spaces and all the resources that are necessary for all children, especially in historically underserved neighborhoods where trauma was often pervasive even before the pandemic?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And if anybody could build something or create something, I can, being a builder. And I think it's really important, as well as I think it's important to create a foundation for a school system. You want to be in a school that you want to be in. You want to go to bathrooms that are clean and tiles that are not cracked. And you want to also be able to have a mental health professional on staff at all times with a separate area that is conducive if a child feels fatigued or upset, because children nowadays, and even back when I was going to school, you know, kids hormones are flying and you can feel different ways at different times. So I think a very separate space for a child who doesn't feel well at the time, we can have a mental health professional that addresses their concerns in a separate area so that it's private and secure. But I think having somebody, I think having that separate at any given time, if they are upset, is crucial to the health and well-being for their mental well-being.
Great, thank you very much. Next is Mr. McGuire, sir.
Listen, COVID has exacted an enormous emotional price on all of us, but especially our children. Those who have lost loved ones, those who've lost brothers, those who've lost parents and grandparents. Currently, the DOE employs approximately 1 social worker for every 700 students, 1 for every 700. The national standard suggests a ratio of 1 for every 250 for general education, and then for high need school populations, 1 for 50. We need to make certain in the DOE that we ensure the number of social workers and therapists are the highest where the need is the highest, not where the most money tends to flow. That all schools have at least a 150 social worker to student ratio or better for at least the next 3 school years. We need help. The DOE needs to provide that help. We need to ensure that we have the appropriate social network for our children who are suffering mightily.
Eric Adams, your thoughts about this?
Well, clearly, oftentimes when we think about mental health assistance, we focus on only the students, but we need to look at the entire school community. Many teachers are going through vicarious trauma based on what is happening to the students every day. The goal is to really develop the full personhood of our children and give them the wraparound services and support that they need. That's why I sponsored sending our teachers and administrators away so they can learn mindfulness, yoga, and meditation, so they can come back and teach our children self-care. We need to have safe spaces. We need to make sure that we have enough counselors to address these concerns. And as hard as it is to believe, we need to have a nutritionally based education, because food has an impact on our emotional state as well. It's about not spot improving, but a holistic way of addressing the fullness of our children. And that is what I'm going to focus on.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chang, let's talk about the mental health and the social well-being of our children.
Yeah, Eric raises a great point about the mental distress being experienced by but not just the students, but by the faculty and by the families of students, so many of whom have suffered COVID, so many of whom have suffered deaths. One of the questions is not only what are they going to learn, but are they ready to learn? And so we need to think about this as we come back to school. It's a super, super important thing. I know this personally very well, just from having grown up in a domestic violence household, that the trauma is real and it takes a lot of healing to get past it. We raised a question about spaces. I was the chair of the student school leadership team at Brooklyn Tech, and I can tell you overcrowding is a problem everywhere. Combine that with the lack of the ratio of guidance counselors, it's a terrible issue. So we need to leverage all of the resources in our city, including the public libraries and community centers, to make space available for these kinds of important activities.
Thank you very much. Then I guess, Mr. Downs, you will get the final word on this particular subject.
Thank you. And this is a very important subject to me personally. I am part of a generation that has seen a severe decline in mental health, especially in the high school ages. And having more counselors, along with teaching parents and teaching teachers, spotting the signs of depression and anxiety in students, is crucial to ensuring that no one is left behind. And part of that also is reducing our class sizes as well. When you have a class of 30 people, it's very easy to slip into anonymity towards the back of it, and much harder for teachers to recognize patterns of depression and anxiety, especially around the COVID pandemic. Another big part is expanding our after-school programs, especially our arts education, our physical education, and our musical theater education that allow children to grow, create support networks within friends, teachers, coaches, faculty, and help to allow them to grow as people as to who they are. By having these programs, we can really make a difference in mental health of students, along with healthy eating and exercise.
Thank you very much. Candidates, I just want to thank you each. I know that there's a lot to talk about on each of these questions, but you've been great about staying within the time frame. And so I just wanted to throw that in there and say that all of us appreciate you doing that. The next question will go to you, Mr. McGuire. Let's go right to it. As diverse as the Bronx is, remarkably, our communities are segregated by race, gender, and ethnicity. What is your plan to ensure that all Bronx schools have diverse student bodies, faculty, and staff that are culturally responsive and sensitive to the needs of their students?
Listen, inclusion and equity needs to be at the heart of everything that we do. I don't think of it as a separate program or curriculum. I think of it as an underpinning of all of our efforts. We need to ensure we're recruiting diverse staff and faculty, but that starts with encouraging more high school students to go to college and study education, give them the access to specialized classes in high school and financial support to make that degree accessible. In terms of desegregation, I support efforts to seek desegregate schools, but school segregation is a large result of neighborhood segregations. That's why I have a plan to build 350,000 additional housing units, and I would focus on city funds on deeply affordable housing and make certain that our children's lives are not determined by our zip code. And that's how we have to focus on it. Equity and inclusion are fundamental to the American right to education, and that's what we need to be focused on.
Thank you very much. Mr. Adams, this a very difficult question about segregation in our schools.
I believe it's imperative that we look at segregation, and I believe what Ray alluded to is so important. We have segregated schools because we have, that is why you see we are segregated, and we need to acknowledge that. And we need to be intentional and creative by doing so. And it's not just placing children in school seats next to each other. It is placing our society next to each other. That's why I say, let's change the way we are doing upzoning. Let's upzone in affluent communities, such as 42nd Street, 14th Street, 9th Avenue to Park Avenue. What would that do? That would segregate the schools in the area, access to healthy food, access to a transit community. That is what we need to look at, a holistic approach to dealing with the issues around segregation. And I must apologize, I have to jump off right now. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to come on, and I look forward to furthering this conversation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Adams, for your participation. We certainly appreciate it.
Thank you.
We will then move on to Art Chang. Mr. Chang, what are your thoughts about this question?
Well, I think Ray raises a fantastic point also about the fact that the segregated schools reflect the segregation of our communities, and that we need to build low-income housing, a vast increase in low-income housing. The other issue, though, is that we have to think about what does segregation mean, and what does desegregation mean. When I talk to my Black friends, they don't want their kids bused to a white school district. They don't necessarily want white kids bused to their school district. What everybody wants is a quality education where they are. And so I think under my administration, we will be focusing on how we increase quality of education to every school. And one of the important aspects of that is going to be creating diversity among the teachers and among the administrators in those schools, because it is so important for students to be able to see people who look like them, who understand them intrinsically, and who are able to give them that kind of support and guidance.
Thank you very much. Mr. Downs, your thoughts?
Well, when it comes to inclusion and diversity, one of the biggest things we need to look at is education, and actually educating students on race, gender identity, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and exposing them to the differences we have within society so that we can stop this systemic racism and open their eyes to what the world actually is and the different people who live within it. Bringing kids to different schools, in my mind, should not be an option. We should be working to help students in their own communities, and they should not have to leave their community to get a better education. Not to mention, bringing kids to, especially Black kids, to majority white schools creates a huge amount of bullying. I was personally called the M-word on multiple occasions during my schooling and told I would not amount to a lot of things because of my race, because of being in a predominantly white school. So I think we need to really benefit our own communities and ensure that students are treated fairly wherever they are in their education.
Thank you very much. Ms. Kavovit, you get the final word on this particular question.
Well, schools are here to help us learn. I think that kids should stay where they feel comfortable. And I think that where they feel comfortable is where that they should be able to bring in their own culture, whatever, their pride that they have in their own culture, the music of their culture. And I think that students thrive on where they feel most comfortable. And so I believe that each school should prosper within itself. And if I were mayor, I would create a deputy mayor for each borough, and then have caseworkers go into each school to make sure that kids were thriving in their respective schools. So I think kids want to be where they feel most comfortable right now. Not right now, but at all times.
At all times. Okay. Thank you very much. I guess we're going to move to the next question, and that will start off with Mr. Chang. Mr. Chang, the New York City Department of Education has a long and sad history of special education complaints, with an estimated 11,000 filed in the last school year alone. On average, these cases take almost a year to resolve, well beyond the 75-day legal limit. How do we improve the special education appeals process so that we ensure that mandated services and supports are provided to special needs students? And of course, how can we ensure compliance and compliance accountability in the Department of Education?
Well, the complaints start upstream. The complaints are the symptoms of the problems. The school system has been under a court order for the past 40 years to develop a technology system that is able to track and administer compliance with the IEPs of every student. 30% of students in the school system have an IEP. I'm the father of a student with a learning difference, and we know that this is a big problem. So the technology is there, and instead, this is a problem with the city's technology efforts. Hundreds of millions of dollars have been invested and wasted in failed technology efforts to manage this. But this is an upstream problem, as I said. This should be a problem of ensuring there are enough resources for teachers, for trainers, or counselors to be able to help families and students through this situation.
Thank you very much. Ms. Kavovit, special ed.
I mean, I'd like to know, first of all, what, if I were mayor, I'd want to know specifically what the complaints were, because how do you solve a problem if you don't really know what the problem is of each complaint? But I think we would have to streamline this. Again, I would say technology is very important, and also having special caseworkers for each complaint so that it could be streamlined more effectively within a technological type of system. But again, I mean, you know, we're not
30
being
seconds.
very specific here. So I'm not really sure how to address what I would have to know what the complaints are and why there are 11,000 complaints to really get specific with this type of question.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's move to you, Mr. McGuire.
Yeah,
Special ed.
this clearly is just another indication of the crisis in which you're in. We're talking about special education. The challenges have gotten compounded by remote learning. This comes down to being a matter of prioritization. And unfortunately, we have not done enough to prioritize appropriately the service that's needed for our special needs students. It should be the case that with state committing fully funding the campaign for fiscal equity, that we have additional financial resources coming to the city. We need to use the opportunity to start living up to our commitment to special education. I would also do a review of the appeal process, which, as you know, and you rightfully point out, is broken. It should be the case that our parents are spending time fighting for the services that is better spent caring for their children. So we need to streamline the process. We need to recognize that we need some additional support to take care of our special needs children, and that we need to have this as a higher priority, higher level of prioritization, because today 11,000 is a number that is probably understated.
All right, thank you very much. Let's see, we're up to our 7th question, and that will go to you, Mr. Downs. Let's talk about underserved communities, which has been a recurrent theme throughout this program. There's been an ongoing movement in Bronx communities toward food sustainability and also its general relation to health. Some schools in the Bronx are exploring urban agriculture by participating in programs such as FISH, which is the Food Innovation, Sustainability, and Health program. Can these agricultural hubs be established in other elementary, middle, and high schools in partnership with Bronx community-based organizations, and of course, CUNY and SUNY as well? How do we establish these things in our schools?
Well, when it comes to food insecurity, and especially in the Bronx, I've seen it firsthand when I volunteered at Part of the Solution on Webster Avenue. I know that we face a crisis, especially within low-income communities, that food, especially healthy food, is not always relatively available. And food handed out at food banks may be going rotten or stale or what have you. So in creating these programs in our school, in growing fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, we can provide those to food banks, allow kids to work in those education sources as an after-school program in growing their own food and using it as a biology course, along with creating jobs to build out those programs and create renewable farms and source of renewable energy within our schools. So frankly, we need to expand and create a program to better bridge the gap of food insecurity. And in my mind, that is with doing a program like FISH and ensuring that we make sure our students know what healthy food is and how to grow it, along with providing for their community.
Folks, I want to, before we move on, I want to interject that we are joined by a former commissioner of the city's housing department, HUD secretary, and budget director for President Barack Obama. It is my pleasure to welcome Sean Donovan to the program. Mr. Donovan, they said you had just joined us. Nice to see you again, sir.
It's great to be with you. Gary, thanks so much for having me.
Okay. Now, did you hear the question that we were just working with? Because this would be your turn in the rotation. We'd love to give you the opportunity, or would you like me to repeat the question?
If you don't mind repeating it, I know it was about food, but I want to make sure I get it right.
All right, so let's do it again. There has been an ongoing movement in Bronx communities towards food sustainability and its relation to general health. Some schools in the Bronx are exploring urban agriculture by participating in programs such as FISH, which is Food Innovation, Sustainability, and Health. Can these agricultural hubs be established in other elementary, middle, and high schools in partnership with Bronx community-based organizations, and also in partnership with other organizations or institutions like CUNY and SUNY?
The answer is absolutely yes. And as someone who started working at a nonprofit in the Bronx 25 years ago, this is a huge opportunity in our schools, but also in our homes, in our communities. I've spent many years working to encourage and grow community gardens. I helped create Via Verde on Brook Avenue in the South Bronx that has vegetable gardens and fruit trees growing on the
30
roofs that the
seconds.
kids pick after getting home from school and eat for dinner. And so there's a huge opportunity to creatively use not just ground and vacant lots, but also rooftops and other areas at
15
schools,
seconds.
and to partner with organizations that do this work every day around the Bronx and around the city. So I'm a big fan of this work, and it's something I've worked on the last 25 years.
Thank you very much. Let's see, just reorienting myself to the order, then that would be Ms. Kavovit. You would be next on this question.
Well, this type of initiative would be crucial for me to implement. And I think that it would be imperative to have the budget for this, because I believe something like this creates discipline for kids. The most important thing is to make them feel accountable, responsible, and empowered, and to be able to grow things that you can actually eat and eat for dinner, and you can watch and use tools and work with your hands. And it's a very it's a task that lets you it allows you to start something, and it transforms into something that feeds you, and it's very rewarding. So I think this builds self-esteem as a young kid, and I think that this initiative is crucial for young people of today.
Thank you very much. Mr. McGuire, food sustainability in the Bronx and in our schools?
Yeah, let me be clear. The way that I would approach this, I would expand these programs. As you know, we need to prioritize access to health food as an essential part of education. Children who don't eat can't learn. And although there's universal free lunch for all students, may not have been able to take advantage of the program during the pandemic. So access to healthy food during the school day can change eating behaviors. And as you know, it can decrease childhood obesity. I'll increase the number of locations for the summer schools program, which, as you know, also provides food for any child who wants it beyond its current 400 locations. I'll also make access to summer companion meals, a program enacted during the pandemic where families could obtain meals in addition to their children. I'll look at expanded deli style cafeterias, and also make sure that this becomes a highest priority, because eating and diet are fundamental to whether or not our children can learn.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chang?
Well, as someone who spent a couple summers working on his dad's truck farm in Ohio, I can tell you that it is a lot of hard work, and you learn a lot about the relationship between food and the land and your bodies. And so I thank you for that question. Whoever came up with that should be applauded for that thought. I also want to just address the notion, though, of whether this is sufficient to address food insecurity in the Bronx or in the city. There is enough food. We know that 40% of the food grown in this country gets thrown away. And so there is sufficient food if we organize our systems correctly. The systems of distribution, the systems of wholesale, and we need to be able to do a better job of that. This may include things like alternative ownership of food, of grocery stores, things like food co-ops. I belonged to the Park Slope Food Co-op for 25 years, and I know it can be done. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, Mr. Donovan, you're right on time, so you're going to get the first whack at this particular question. Over the past 2 decades, schools that provide vocational training and technical training have been systematically removed as options for students in the Bronx. Yet these are excellent practical educational opportunities that can lead directly to sustainable employment. What would you do to provide our middle and high school students with better access to career and technical training opportunities? That is for you, Mr. Donovan.
Thanks, Gary. This question gets it exactly right, because the decline in focus on vocational technical schools is part of a broader problem that we've had, where we've stopped making strong connections between school and work. And we need to build an entire pipeline that goes from cradle to career and ensure that we're building jobs again and again at every opportunity. Very specifically, what I would do is ensure that we're investing in and creating more technical and vocational schools, particularly in the Bronx. I would guarantee that every single high school student will have at least one paid internship
50.
or summer job, some kind of experience, apprenticeship by the time they graduate. And I would create the biggest apprenticeship and internship program the city has ever seen, the New York City Job Corps, and make community colleges free in New York City. All of that would create a pipeline into jobs.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Donovan. Let's go to Ms. Kavovit.
Well, I think that to say what Mr. Donovan has just said, I think that it is crucial, being in the construction business, it is crucial to have vocational programs in high schools. And I firmly believe in free education, in the free education system prior to the 1975 fiscal crisis. We had CUNY as a free educational system, and I think it's crucial that we have that again for community, senior college, and vocational college. I think we should have vocational schools in all the schools so people can afford to lead these middle income lifestyles. Plumbers, electricians, welders, steam fitters, all of these things are so important. And if I were mayor, I would make sure that every school had a vocational program. And I think that it is very important to be able to have kids learn with their hands and know that they don't have to go on to be Congress people or scientists, that they could, that they can lead a very, very good lifestyle in construction or in the NYPD or things that you don't need to be a rocket scientist.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's go to Mr. McGuire.
First, I'm flattered that others have acknowledged my plan for Cradle to Career, which you can see for Ray at rayformayor.com. What I intend to do is to expand the model of high school that provides every student both with the general foundation, general knowledge, but also a pathway to a specific professional future. And that includes in specific what I call creating new industry academies that are vocational training institutes that allow students to spend half of the 11th grade and all the 12th grade in a school with a career-specific focus aligned with a significant New York City industry. Academies are going to offer courses towards high-demand careers, hospitality, healthcare, tech, film, media, and they're going to partner with NYC employers to ensure that the graduates have access to jobs. This is my public-private partnerships, which I'm uniquely positioned to pursue. And I must tell you, Gary, that at this point, I have to excuse myself. I think I put you all on notice that I was going to have to excuse myself, but I'm delighted that you had me here. And I'm so excited about the questions that you've asked because they're fundamental to who I am and the education that's gotten me to this screen. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. McGuire, and we'll probably see you around town. We appreciate your participation today. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's get a response on this question from Mr. Chang.
All right, thank you. I'll start by saying that working with your hands is actually something that every kid should be able to do. This is whether it's an arts education or wood or metal shop. By the time I graduated from 8th grade in Ohio, I had done wood shop, metal shop. I learned how to bake and cook and sew. And these skills actually gave me a lot more confidence and freedom to pursue other things later on in my career. I'm calling for an urban youth corps that provides paid internships starting in high school, extending through college,
30 seconds.
In a variety of different areas for students to be able to explore what they might want to do later on. Because every student should have a job and should have some idea of what they want to be able to do. The second thing is that I also want to mention that many students have to work. So we need to actually be able to allow students in high school to work to provide for their families while allowing them to pursue a high quality high school education.
Thank you very much. Mr. Downs, for you.
When it comes to education, we all need to acknowledge that for a lot of people, college is not a right, but a privilege. And with that, a lot of people are not afforded that privilege to go on to college. So recreating vocational training courses is something vital to allowing people to grow and work into New York City's workforce directly from high school. And I also believe in high school, we need to teach a life class that helps to teach things like building credit, signing leases, signing loans, learning how to do their taxes, and looking at creating a bank account.
30.
Things that everyone should know in order to grow as a person and become more financially sustainable. Another big part is we shouldn't just stop with hands-on training, but expanding things in the mind, like the arts and our musical theater programs. New York City is
15
uniquely
seconds.
positioned to offer programs that create internships with places like Broadway and make it so students can grow as people in their arts and their creative sides as well.
Thank you very much. We're up to our next question, and this will be directed at first to Ms. Kavovit. Ms. Kavovit, school co-locations, mergers and closures are very problematic throughout the Bronx. The timelines for these changes in school utilization happen on very compressed timelines with little or no input from parents until after a change has been approved by the Panel for Educational Policy. As a result, school communities are left to develop plans on their own. Will you commit to amending a chancellor's regulation in a way where every significant change in school utilization must include plans from school communities, the community at large, and include educational council approval before proceeding with the vote from the Panel for Educational Policy?
Yes, I mean, I think what's wrong right now is that we don't have a comprehensive plan to do these things, and we do things with a Band-Aid. So I think the more that we have a plan in place, the better action we can take. And I think that these programs are integral to all schools, and I would support this.
All right, thank you very much. The next respondent on this will be Mr. Chang. Sir?
100% that parents should have a bigger say earlier on, that we should expand the connection between the school communities and the school leadership. I'm calling for a couple different things. Number one, I'm calling for the ability of City Council to ratify my nomination of a school chancellor. The second is that the mayor would be required to start including all the stakeholders, parents, faculty, the unions, in these kinds of conversations from the very, very beginning of these conversations, not to bring them in at the very end. The traditional process for approval of virtually everything is a broken process in this city and results in way too much conflict and things that we find out at the very, very last minute. So thank you very much. I'll end there.
I appreciate your response. And Mr. Downs.
Thank you. I think one of the best parts about the city and its communities, especially in the Bronx, is that people are not afraid to tell you what they want. And city government needs to be more transparent and more willing to work with our communities by going right to them and asking them what they think would suit them better. And before making any of these large decisions, bringing in anyone involved in the process, especially parents, is vital to ensuring that everyone is on board with what's going to happen and ensuring that the children are treated properly throughout the process and are thought about throughout the process instead of bringing them in at the last minute and just throwing it all at them. We need to make sure that our city government works with the people it serves. And by working with parents from the beginning and working with unions and teachers and faculty and even non-parents that live near schools, we can create a better New York City that works hand in hand with the people of this city.
I have to interject that I can't say I didn't smile knowingly when you said that people of the Bronx will tell you what they think. I think everybody who's here and all of our guests and all of the people who are on our panel would certainly agree with that. Mr. Donovan, you've been around the city a little bit. I guess you agree with that as well.
I have been around the city a little bit. I definitely agree. And I go back a ways in the Bronx. I got to say, Thomas Downs is an impressive, I wish all our young people were as impressive as he is. Before he was born, I was working with parents and communities in the Bronx, folks like the South Bronx churches, Nos Quedamos. And I fundamentally believe, and I haven't just talked the talk, I've walked the walk on this, that we need to engage communities in planning everywhere. And so that's why I have very specific proposals around the CECs and making sure they have a role to be much more engaged, not only in approving, but actually in building those plans. So I know as President Obama's budget director that money is power. So I would use participatory budgeting to make sure the CECs have budget decisions around these, not just approval, and have staff and other funding that really allows you all to make sure that you're engaged early on in the process and make those decisions work for every community.
Thank you very much. I guess then we're up to the next question, and that would go to you, Mr. Chang. Let's talk about the panel for educational policy and elections. Would you support an amendment to the New York State education law that would allow for additional elected parent members to serve on the city school board, the PEP?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the PEP for too long has been viewed as a rubber stamp for the chancellor's programs. And, this ties directly into the prior question about parent involvement in these conversations early on. Things like the debate over the gifted and talented program, which I think the chancellor and the mayor expected would be rubber stamped in this last go around. The PEP, did the unusual thing and actually stood up and said no. I think it's time for the PEP to actually have a much more being much more in touch with the communities in the schools, the families, the students, and definitely the faculty and teachers and the unions. So yes, I would support an increase of elected parent members into the PEPs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Downs. What are your thoughts about the PEP and potentially including more parents?
Well, I think parents really have a great sense of what is best for children, and for them to be more involved in the PEP as possibly elected members, or even taking the spots of some of the people appointed by the mayor directly, I think is very important to ensuring that parents are more open and involved in the process to benefit the children of the city. The other thing I would say about that is if we are going to bring parents in, being a parent is a big job. And whatever else they are doing in life to support their families is also a significant amount of what they do in life. So any parent that is involved in the PEP or even our CECs, I think should receive some sort of monetary bonus, not something crazy, but just something there that acknowledges their work and their valuable time that they are going there to support our children and support the betterment of our schools.
Thank you very much, Mr. Donovan. Your thoughts?
So building on my comments earlier and something Thomas just said, if we're going to be serious, not just about including more parents, but making it possible for parents to actively participate, we do need to put real skin in the game, provide compensation. But I also believe that too often, especially because parents are busy with their lives outside of their roles on the PEP or CECs, we need to think clearly about how we put the support in place to make sure that there is real work that can be done by parents and PEPs, not to be a rubber stamp, to make sure that, for example, we have money for consultants and others that can work closely with members of the PEP to study options and to look at plans in a way that really allows deeper engagement on these issues. So I would provide funding for that as well.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kavovit.
Yeah, I would think that I would provide funding for this because anytime that we have parents involved, that will help educate the children and provide a better support to an overall committee, especially involving the children, I think is always the best idea if it enhances the overall academic result of the children. So I think that the parents should be compensated for their time, and I think that I would support this in all ways.
All right, thank you very much. Let's go to the next question, and the first respondent to this will be Mr. Downs. Curriculum development. Let's talk about curriculums. There is extensive data that programs like music and art keep children in school, keep them engaged and focused, help improve their SAT scores. It also lowers crime, especially youth crimes. These are important staple programs that have been cut for thousands of Bronx children. Can City Hall have influence on revising curriculums to include music and arts programs to keep crime down and help children achieve in schools. Is this something you'd support? And if so, how would you do it?
Well, especially with music and arts programs, that's something that is really close to who I am as a person. Throughout my schooling, I participated in musical theater, and a majority of that time was spent directing. So I saw behind the scenes children grow as people, and especially shy kids in school kind of come out of their shells and become their own person. So I think musical theater and arts programs are very important to the development of children and to ensuring that our children can grow creatively, which is vital to their education. Not to mention, we're in New York City. We have Broadway, we have museums,
30 seconds.
we have every possible opportunity to grow children creatively. So to expand those programs into our school, to create musical and arts-centered buildings even within the Bronx, to expand those programs and have a place for children to practice and to learn and to grow, I think is very vital to us growing as a society.
Thank you very much, Mr. Donovan. Same question about curriculums.
So Gary, I have committed as part of my education and arts and culture platforms to bring arts back to every school in the city. We need to ensure that this is a central part of what every child is learning. As the father of a musician who I would say, quite frankly, it saved him. He was struggling in school before he found music, and it really gave him a sense of mission and purpose, discipline to learn. And I believe every child should have that opportunity. We also have to make broader connections. We should be working much more closely with arts organizations to come and teach after school. There's so many amazing arts organizations that do that. We should be creating pathways into jobs in the art as part of my apprenticeship and training programs. I would create a specific school for back office arts and administration so that we know that there are many, many different pathways into the arts in New York. All of those are things I would do as mayor.
Thank you very much. Ms. Kavovit, your thoughts?
I think the worst thing we ever did was get rid of the arts program and the music program. I think that is the catalyst for all students to be able to succeed besides the vocational program as well. One of the things that I would do would be to tap into the music industry, also the museums, the music. My son goes to Berkeley Music School, and like Mr. Donovan said, if it wasn't for the music program and his outlet and his love for music, he would be in a very different place. So I think it's crucial that we not only have a renewed music and arts program, but we expand it greatly, because I believe that these types of programs enable kids to really think and build self-esteem. And I think that this is one of the things that would lead to a very large reduction in youth crime.
Thank you very much. I guess we go to Mr. Chang on this question.
Of course, we should have arts education. There's no question about it. In second grade, I was marched into a room full of instruments, and I was asked, which instrument would you like to play? I picked up a violin and I played it for the next 10 years and was trained semi-professionally in it. But it really set me up for actually thinking about the arts as a potential career. My first job was teaching music. I worked in museum exhibit and design and construction. I worked in architecture, and then many of my startups have been in music, television, and film. So the arts are not just about creativity during high school, it's a profession. And in this time when so many artists are out of work, and the arts sector, which creates about 8.5% of the city's gross revenue, has a huge number of the most talented people in America who are available to come in and teach. And the legislature has just appropriated the $13 billion from the student fair. I can't remember what the acronym is now. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
But $13 billion for education, and we should use a significant piece of that to restore the arts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I guess everybody had a chance to respond to that. So let's go to the next question about infrastructure. And this will start with you, Mr. Donovan. To put it bluntly, class sizes are too big. Everybody knows that, especially now when children need as much individual academic and emotional care as possible. There are existing abandoned buildings that can be converted to school space. And of course, a great desire in many Bronx communities for new school facilities that simply never get built. Also, there's a great need for repairing, updating, and modernizing the existing ones with new furniture, Wi-Fi capacity, electrical capacity. Now, especially, we need good AC and ventilation improvements. How do you address these if you are the mayor?
So Gary, there are three big pathways to be able to get the funding that we need and to move forward on this, because I couldn't agree more. We need to invest in our schools in the way that they deserve, to treat schools as the single most important infrastructure we have, because without them, our children don't learn and they don't have opportunity. So first, we need a mayor who can go to Washington and get the help we deserve. Every year, New York sends $23 billion more to Washington back in return. As a former budget director for President Obama, no one in this race understands how to get the help we deserve from Washington in the way that I do. But second, we have a real opportunity to use this moment when we can upgrade our schools to make them energy efficient, to put solar panels and gardens on the roofs. We can leverage that to bring in the cost savings that energy efficiency brings, to bring in capital. I've done that in housing. We can do that in schools. And then finally, we need to think creatively about our zoning and other rules to create more space for schools.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Kavovit. Let's talk infrastructure. What do you think?
Yeah, this is one of the main reasons I can't understand for the life of me. I went to a school in the Bronx that was falling apart, and here we are 30 years later, and we're still talking about that. And why are we talking about that? Because there's no comprehensive plan. Being in construction, how do you get things built? You have an architect, you have an engineer, you have a project manager. If I were mayor, I would first of all go to each school in the Bronx and assess what schools need to be repaired, what schools need to have better HVAC system, sprinkler, fire alarm, plumbing. I mean, if kids don't like where they are 8 hours a day, then they're not going to want to learn in these schools. It's very simple. Put together a comprehensive plan with the right consultants in place so you can actually start hammering nails and getting things working instead of talking about it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chang. School infrastructure.
Yes, absolutely. So a couple things. Number one, we definitely need to reduce schools' class sizes, especially in primary and elementary school. They are way too large. But class sizes are schools are overcrowded and class sizes are too large across the board. You know, as a chair of the school leadership team at Brooklyn Tech, you know, it pained me to see students on their breaks sitting in the hall because there is no place to go, because the libraries were insufficient to hold them. So yes, we need to do this, but we also need to think differently about what it means to attend school physically. Because what we've learned from this pandemic is that there are many digital resources that we can indeed think about learning remotely. That for school students, especially in high school, that we can think about sending them to college, potentially at college in person. And if not, then digitally, like through things like edX, so they can take courses from Harvard or MIT and get class credit for it, which you don't need to do when you're sitting in school in person.
Thank you very much. I guess Mr. Downs gets the final word on this particular question, sir.
Well, to start off, reducing class sizes is essential. Large class sizes create the ability for anonymity among students, and students who may be barely passing can very easily skirt under teachers' radar and not receive the help that they need within class. Another big part is ensuring that our schools are safe for our children. That means renovating them so they are removed of all lead in their pipes and in their paint, ensuring that HVAC systems and temperature control systems work to keep students safe when the weather changes, and ensuring that our technology in our classroom keeps up with the 21st century with higher speed internet and of technology within the classroom. Another big part is our abandoned buildings that could be turned into schools is something that we should look at. And working with parents to design new schools that will be there for the next 100 years and can actually operate properly with students is crucial. Not to fail to mention, with these new buildings, we can create them to be more energy efficient, have space for arts programs and after school programs, and ensure that every child has a seat with a class size that's lower than 20 at least.
Time. Thank you very much. Candidates, we have come to the end of our segment where we have questions that were prepared by the organizers, the Bronx Parent Leaders Advocacy Group, in collaborations with CECs 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12, the New Settlement Parent Action Committee, the African Democratic Club, the STEMDUP Institute, and BronxNet Television. But we still have a little time, and I'm going to pull out some questions from the chat so we can get an idea of what some of the people who are participating asking and what they're saying. One of the questions that came up early in our program was frankly a heartbreaking one. The numbers are startling. 20%, I've seen numbers as high as 20% of our students who are in a school go to school from homeless shelters. This is, of course, a thorny question for a mayoral candidate because it's not only about schools, but it's about how we're going to deal with that particular problem. So let's go to Ms. Kavovit, and let's talk about dealing with this very difficult and very unfortunate problem of children who come to school from homeless shelters. What do you think?
Well, first of all, there should not be homeless shelters for kids going to school. There should be permanent housing. And it breaks my heart to think that kids are in homeless shelters or they're homeless without food, without shelter, without family. So if I were mayor, I would definitely tap into NYCHA. And this goes again to the city as the largest landlord in New York. Why don't we have appropriate housing for children? And I would again assess the land that we have, assess the buildings that are in disrepair, that are not in use, and I would make sure that families had access to these NYCHA properties that are underutilized.
And thank you very much. It's, I guess, a dual question, takes us a little bit out of the realm of education, but it is so important, and I guess everything's intertwined in our children in schools. So, Mr. Chang, what do you think?
Well, we know that a year of homelessness reduces a child's chance of graduating from high school by 40%. It's an absolutely devastating impact that has lifelong impacts for that student and for that community. The thing we need to do, the size of the problem is immense. It's tens of thousands of people who are homeless, tens of thousands of students who are homeless. And the question is, what do we do about this? And I think we're standing on the tip of an iceberg. You know, with over 300,000 cases pending in housing court, we're looking at a potential eviction problem of the size of Boston. And with homeless shelters costing, transitional shelters costing between $176 and $240 a night, this is an incredibly expensive proposition. The first thing we need to do is keep people in their homes. It's the most important thing that we can do for the benefit of the family and especially for the student.
Thank you very much, Mr. Downs.
Well, just as a general thing, I would propose to not only build more housing in the city, but ensure that there are adequate apartment spaces for any family unit that is experiencing homelessness. And with that, it would create more jobs coming out of the pandemic with that giant boom in construction. But the priority in my mind when it comes to homelessness is ensuring that family units have a stable apartment life to live in, and that ensuring kids that are experiencing homelessness are in a stable apartment system. And with that, sending them to school requires them to have proper technology, devices, books, and equipment to learn, along with, in my mind, new clothing through food bank or through clothing banks, I should say, because at the end of the day, kids can be incredibly cruel.
15 seconds.
And to go to school every day and be in a low-income situation or a homeless situation and be made fun of because of it at school is horrifying, and that should not be the case. And we should do everything in our power to make sure that that bullying cannot occur within our schools.
Thank you very much, Mr. Donovan.
Gary, you said that this problem is heartbreaking. it's more than heartbreaking. It should make us all angry that we live in the wealthiest city in the wealthiest country on earth and have neighbors sleeping on the streets. And that's what spurred me to be a public servant 30 years ago. Growing up in this city, I saw homelessness exploding on our streets. I started volunteering in a homeless shelter in college. And then I went to work for the National Coalition for the Homeless. That began my career in housing and homelessness and public service. I know this is a solvable problem because I led the strategy for President Obama that dramatically reduced homelessness around the country. In fact, we ended veteran homelessness in more than 80 cities and states and dramatically reduced all homelessness across the country. Here's what we need to do. Reimagine our right to shelter as a right to housing in the city and get every agency involved. That means a team dedicated to the Department of Education to work with our housing teams across the city, community schools, everything we need to end homelessness for our children.
Thank you very much. Let's talk about the specialized high schools. And so this question will be directed at first to Mr. Chang. There has been a lot of talk in the city of New York about gifted and talented programs, as well as entrance to specialized high schools. Right now, the only entrance is that SAT exam. Is that the best way to assess who should be in specialized high schools? Or are there other ways? If so, what are those ways, Mr. Chang?
Right. So I think we're looking at the question the wrong way. And by the way, just to be super upfront, I'm in support of keeping the Shazat and phasing it out over the first 4 years of my administration. But the question is, there are way too many students who are smart, who have the ability to do a specialized high school. And so why do we constrain that need? Instead of actually having only specialized high schools, because students are different, because they have great strengths in some areas and have differences in other areas. Why don't we actually give advanced students direct access to college courses, either digitally online or by having them go to classes at CUNY or NYU right here in the city? Like, this can be done. We can get them to have college credit and take these advanced courses at the same time, which would also shorten the period that they would be in college and reduce their college costs as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Downs?
Well, when it comes to specialized high schools, I think that we should not only have one means of entrance, especially since it's a means of entrance that incredibly privileged people can very easily have their children tutored just to pass that exam. I think we should look at a more holistic approach that follows grades throughout years, programs that the students were involved in, and their at-home life, because that is such a significant amount of education for students. At the end of the day, at-home life, in my mind, easily makes up half of the growing of a child. And with that, I think that the college courses that we might be able to offer in schools is already existing within the AP programs that exist within this country. And expanding our AP curriculum within our high schools and our specialized high schools, and ensuring that students are not pressured to take the test, but are capable of learning that material and possibly taking the test that would be funded by the city, that does count for a lot of institutions as college credits of scoring a high enough score, and ensuring that tutoring programs are there for the students to score high enough.
Thank you. Mr. Donovan, the same question for you about gifted and talented and specialized high schools.
Gary, let me be very direct on this. Any entrance exam that leads to having only 7 Black students this past year at Stuyvesant and a dramatic underrepresentation of students, Black and brown students at our specialized schools has to change. And so I believe we must add other criteria and ensure by measuring every year representation in our specialized schools that we are making progress there. We have examples around the city and in other places of weighted lotteries and using grades and other means of entrance that we must employ. But we should also be clear that there are just 8 specialized schools, and we must more broadly create more opportunity, more highly successful and integrated schools in every borough of this city, especially the Bronx.
Thank you very much. Ms. Kavovit, your thoughts on this question?
Well, I think that first of all, we have to prep the students better. I think that we can offer them tutoring, but I think it should be the testing should be based on what they've learned. So the criteria should be not a unified type of test, but really what they've learned. But I think we should also give them incentives. I think that we should be able to put minority students in, they have a program called the Discovery Program, which is focused on minorities. And I think if children started much younger, instead of prepping them in 8th grade or 9th grade, and we start prepping them in 2nd grade or 1st grade and 2nd grade and 3rd grade, and we have to give them the access in the early years to have tutoring and to have different academic
15
programs,
seconds.
then I think that we would be able to develop more equity for them, and they would be able to gain entry into some of the more elite schools if that's where they wanted to go.
Okay, thank you very much. So we'll go to the next question. This came from D. Myrie in our chat. And D. Myrie wants to know, and so this will go to you, Mr. Downs. What about retaining teachers of color? All the statistics show that children learn better from teachers who look like them. How do we talked about integrating our schools. How do we integrate our teaching force?
Well, that's a great question. And it is really important that we have teachers that look like students to give them examples of people that they can learn from who look like them. And in retaining those people, we need to ensure that we provide a system and an application system within this city to allow more people of color to be interested in these jobs by making them higher paying, giving them subsidies to live within the communities that they teach, and making it so that they feel comfortable teaching in a New York City public school rather than a higher paying public school in other districts around New York City in Jersey, Westchester, and Nassau County, or instead going to a private school. I think that retaining teachers of color and teachers of different cultures is vital to education and ensuring that not every teacher looks the exact same and ensuring that children have something that reflects themselves.
Thank you. Mr. Donovan?
Gary, this is such an important question. And all the evidence is, especially by 3rd grade, if a student of color has a teacher of color, the likelihood of them graduating goes up significantly. And we need to recognize in a system that is more than 85% students of color, we have fewer than 45% teachers of color. This has to be a top priority. And it is both recruiting and retaining. We have to do both of those. I would ensure that we're creating new pathways into teaching. One of my favorite is what I call the Education Recovery Corps. Why don't we get our young people from CUNY, recent graduates, into the classroom right now, side by side with teachers helping on academic, but also social and emotional recovery and creating a pathway into jobs.
15.
I would create also many more residencies and other scaffolds to teachers to ensure that we're doing much more to retain our teachers of color as well. All of those are critical pieces in ensuring we get this incredibly important issue right.
Thank you very much. Ms. Kavovit, your thoughts?
Well, I would love to see a program put into place during the high school years that really developed children that wanted to be teachers and really nurtured their love for learning and love for teaching so that they can go on to maybe teach in the schools that they were students in. But I think it's imperative that we have teachers, just like the NYPD has been very successful in diversifying their police force. I think that we can be successful in diversifying the teachers and also offering different programs for teachers, like merit-based programs that give teachers incentives for doing well or increasing the grades of the students. I think that would be important to be able to attract teachers in these schools, in these communities.
Thank you. Mr. Chang, you get the last comment on this particular question.
Great, thank you. The first thing we need to do is actually improve our school system so that we actually have a system where students in our schools are moving on to college in the proportionate that they exist within our school system. Right now, we live in a majority minority city. We have about 40% immigrants. There is no reason why we should not have a school teaching staff that looks like the composition of our city. And so to encourage this, I would also recommend that we create free college tuition for students who are committing to go into a profession of teaching, to offer free master's programs so teachers can get their certification, and then do everything we can to allow them to live right here in the city in which they teach. There are startups right now who are committing to investing in half of the down payment for teachers to buy their first houses. And I think we should look at programs like that in order to ensure stability in our teaching force.
Thank you, Mr. Downs. Oh, you had already a chance at that.
Yeah, I did.
Right. All right, sorry. So with the candidates coming and going, it became hard to keep track of one after the other. So let's go to our final question, and then we'll do closing statements. There has been a significant uproar about PSAL sports, and when the city created small high schools, many within larger high schools, the small high schools are now saying, well, wait a minute, we don't have the same resources, we don't have the same opportunity to play PSAL sports. I don't think I'm going to need to convince anybody on this panel how important athletics are to a young person's growth. How can we finally get equitability for students to play PSAL sports, even though they may be going to a smaller high school? Mr. Donovan?
So Gary, I spoke earlier about one of my sons. My other is an athlete who learned discipline and teamwork and so many other things through playing soccer. And I have to say, one of the great losses of the pandemic, he was captain of his college soccer team and lost his entire fall season this year of his senior year. And I missed being on the sidelines. So this is important, not just for kids, but for us parents too. Look, we must find ways, as we talked about in the arts, to ensure every child has the opportunity. This isn't just about after school. This is about health. This is about discipline and teamwork. This is about the passion of our kids. And I believe that the city has to find that money. And we have to be able to partner with organizations like RBI and so many others that have been able to find space and create teams, even if that means combining schools or finding ways outside of schools to be able to participate more fully.
Thank you. Ms. Kavovit, the question is about athletics.
Yeah, just like music and arts, sports is imperative to the fundamental growth of kids. As a kid growing up in the Bronx, I played a lot of sports. I was also a figure skater, and it taught me one thing. It taught me to be disciplined. It taught me to have passion for something and focus and work hard and have accountability. So I think to not have these types of programs is, it doesn't make sense. So if I were, you have to find the budget for it. You have to tap in to corporations, to the federal government to get the money for these programs, because we have to be able to ensure the emerging population, and that they are successful, and that they have opportunity, and that they have ways to grow the economic ladder. And this is the way to do it.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chang, PSAL sports available for every high school student. What do you think?
100%. My younger son was the captain of his JV basketball team at Brooklyn Tech. It was a critically important part of his life. And this year, his senior year, he is missing out on that opportunity to be the captain of his varsity basketball team. It's a tremendous loss. But going back to a prior question about how we make decisions, it shouldn't really be up to us. It should be up to the parents and the students. That the parents and students should actually collaborate to figure out what's the best approach. Like, it makes sense to me that we should
30
take the
seconds.
smaller schools and potentially combine them. But we also have a bigger structural problem, which is that the PSAL operates as an independent entity separate from the DOE. And we need to actually figure out how to
15
deliver
seconds.
quality sports for the entire school system, but do it in a way which is more responsive to the needs of students and families.
Okay, thank you very much. And I guess the final response on the final question will be for you, Mr. Downs.
Thank you. So during high school, I rowed, which is a somewhat not so traditional sport. And I believe that sports are vital to the growth of children, especially in growing team building, in growing discipline, and creating support networks with friends and coaches that can help them throughout life. And offering every student the ability to participate in sports, and like Mr. Chang said, working with the parents to ensure that that's what they want, is crucial. And having an increased expansion of sports available to
30
cities
seconds.
is also very important. Unusual sports like crew, lacrosse, hockey, badminton, squash, tennis, anything that isn't just the typical soccer, football, basketball, and gymnastics.
15 seconds.
Expanding our sports and allowing children to grow in different ways, especially physically and mentally, is crucial. And making sure we find the money for those programs and encourage kids and parents to work with us to create those programs, I think can really benefit a lot of people.
Candidates, thank you so much. We really appreciate your participation this evening. It is time now for closing statements. We'll stick to our 1-minute format, and let's go in our previous order. So that would mean, Mr. Chang, you get the first whack at a closing statement, and you have 1 minute to do so.
Okay, thank you very much. So thank you all for being here. Thank you so much to all the sponsors for this. This was a terrific event. I'm particularly impressed by Mr. Downs. Thank you. You know, your comments are phenomenal. I would love to have you be part of the next mayoral administration. This is a unique historical moment where we have an opportunity to rethink what the purpose of education is. What is it for? Who is it for? What does success mean? Does it mean going into an Ivy League school, or does it mean something else? Does it mean a long-term process to be able to develop confidence, be able to navigate the winds and the changing tides of the world as the students confront them, to be able to learn on their own, to advocate on their own, to be able to understand their role in civic society as well as in the workforce. I think we have an amazing opportunity to do that. I welcome all of you and I invite all of you to come to my Zoom open office hours, which I hold 7 days a week. You can come to my website at chang.nyc to book a time. Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you.
Thank you for your participation this evening, Mr. Chang. Mr. Downs, your closing statement, sir. You have 1 minute.
Thank you for having me tonight, and thank you for everyone who participated with amazing questions tonight. I am someone who's here because I love this city, and I put off college because I don't want to see this city fall any deeper into a hole that we can't get out of. And I think the people of the Bronx, especially parents, are ready for a future of New York City that is inclusive for all. And being here, speaking to you all tonight, I really just want to convey the message that I am here promoting the future of this city. I am the future of this city, and I will live in this city for many years to come.
30
and
seconds.
If you are looking for a future for your children to have, I will be here with them every step of the way. And self-preservation is an amazing, amazing motivator. So I am here because I want this city to do great for the next 100, 200, 1,000 years. And I'm here because I want everyone in this city to be included, to be equal, and to have a society that can grow as a city, as a country, and as a world together.
Thank you. And let's go to Mr. Donovan. 1 minute, sir.
Thank you. And I want to agree with Thomas that we need a Bronx and a New York City that is a place of opportunity for all of our young people. And that's exactly why I went to work 25 years ago in the Bronx to rebuild from the suffering and the challenges that I'd seen in this city as a child. That led to a 30-year career on the front lines of housing and homelessness, but that taught me what it means to lead through crisis.
30 seconds.
I was housing commissioner in this city in the wake of 9/11. I was housing secretary for President Obama in the midst of the worst housing crisis of our lifetimes. When Sandy hit our shores, he asked me to lead the entire federal recovery effort. And then he asked me to lead the $4 trillion federal budget and to lead through Ebola and Zika side by side with Dr. Fauci. He said to us in every one of those crises, we cannot let a crisis go to waste.
Time.
We must reimagine our school system and all of our cities so that it works for everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Mr. Donovan. And the final word for the entire program will be with Barbara Canavit. Excuse me, Cavavit.
You almost got it.
I got it right all night long, and I just done the last one.
You did the whole time. You got nervous.
Well,
Okay.
I guess finally by the end. Go ahead. It's up to you. You have 1 minute.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you very much for having me. I think that we need to create a unified city. We need to revitalize neighborhoods. The city is in chaos, and this is why I'm running. I mean, I've been a businesswoman in New York City. I grew up in the Bronx. I've had a business on 45th Street for the past 25 years. I think it will take new faces, fresh ideas, and comprehensive plans. Because if the politicians have done such a great job, why are we in this mess? And this is why I'm running for mayor. So I think that we need to put things into place. We need to create deputy mayor for education. I think that we need to create programs for education and to enhance areas such as in the Bronx for students to be able to move up the economic ladder, to be able to go to a free community college, free senior college, free vocational college, so that we can get more jobs for them. We can increase the middle income families, and we can all prosper in New York City.
Great. Thank you very much. Candidates, that means Barbara Cavavit, Thomas Downs, Art Chang, Sean Donovan, and previously Ray McGuire and Eric Adams, who participated. We thank you all for your participation. We want you to, if one of you or when one of you gets to City Hall, we want you to make sure that you put an asterisk next to Bronx parents and Bronx schools, because we deserve, you know, we're tired of being in second place. There you go. We do want to also thank our organizers, the Bronx Parent Leaders Advocacy Group, in collaboration with the CECs, all of them, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12, the New Settlement Parent Action Committee, African Democratic Club, STEMDUP Institute, and my home, BronxNet Television. We thank one and all for participating. And if you have further questions, please let your CEC representative know, and we'll try to get everything addressed and answers. We thank everybody for their participation and all the many people who supported the program. So to all, good night, wear your masks, stay safe, and make sure you vote on primary day, which is June 22nd. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. It's great to see you.
Thank you.
Always great.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.